Hey everyone. Now, I'm really sorry. I know I'm starting a few minutes early according to this, but theoretically we sure started an hour ago. Now, I got to give you guys a quick rundown before we bring on some of these amazing women. Now, the problem that happens with me with these time zones is I'm one province over to the west of where I live. Now, normally I always go live at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central. That means it's 5 p.m. where I am right now. And normally everything works out fine. However, the province I'm in is one of those provinces that refuses to do the time change. So it's 5 o'clock here right now, or it's like 5 minutes to 6 now, but it'd be 7 o'clock home, 8 p.m. Eastern. And that's what's caused the confusion in trying to schedule it with Streamlabs, because these guys don't theoretically have a time zone. So we're going to get going right away. Now, I just wanted to give you guys a quick rundown before we bring them on about what's coming up, what's happening. Tomorrow's video is going to be a video about Chewy and Bella and their latest adventures and how it wasn't fun for us. Other videos that are coming up right away, we've got some videos. I'm already scheduled all the way up until July 22nd. So if something happened to me, we're good to go for almost another month. But there's videos on filters. There's video on orchids. There's a couple on orchids. I got one that you guys had asked for, a video on all the different treasures in the fish room. That's coming up too. We got a video on heaters. We got a video on some new fish that I got just before the whole pandemic thing happened that I haven't shown you. And one of the tanks had never been scaped, so that's coming up too. And one that is desperately overdue is more updates pertaining to the giant vivarium, the beast build. We got to get that going right away too. The next one that's going to be coming up, it's just going to take some, I got to finish up the editing. It's all about the mechanics and how everything's working in the background with the lighting and humidification system. So that's coming up. One quick shameless plug that Teespring, the merchandise is available. Who wouldn't want a picture of an old dude? Wear it right on your chest. But bigger question is, how are you guys liking the new logo? My daughter Zoe has helped me enormously in creating different things. She's helped me with several of the thumbnails. There's a video coming up. I've told you guys before it's coming on a video on Forrest the chicken. That's coming up too. And my daughter is super helpful with me on the thumbnail for that. I just love the thumbnail. So I'm absolutely honored that a lot of you guys have been able to come back. We've got Pam Chin in the house, Adele all the way from Australia, Nicole, Science Gal, Diane's back again. She was here earlier. She was the only one that was here earlier. So I'm honored. There are some other live streamers that are going on right now. And my deepest apologies. That was never intended to step on anybody's toes. So can't hear me over this shirt. That's awesome. Oh, Biggs is going to be branding himself a little bit different there in all his splendor. This is not a shirt. As somebody pointed out, tonight is ladies' night. We have 3 absolutely amazing women here. Like, I'm talking, these aren't just amazing women. These are absolute powerhouses in the industry. We have Sandy. We have Shelby from Segrest. These women bring so much to the table. I'm not even going to try and touch it. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. And then we have the one and only Dr. Denise Petty, and she is an aquaculture fish veterinarian. So if you guys got any questions pertaining for these wonderful women, we'll get at it right away. So why don't we get all right? That's right. I got all dolled up for the ladies. That's right. This is about as good, as best as you can do to polish up a turd. That's about it. This is as good as it gets. So let's bring some of these women on board and they can introduce themselves. Here we go. The lovely Miss Shelby. Shelby, tell us about you.
Hello there. I'm a fish girl at heart and born a fish girl, so I had really no choice other than to, this is my career. My parents had tanks. That's really where all this started. I grew up with Bruce Pets in my backyard. That's a large store in Lansing, Michigan that was family owned. I believe they've been in business about 47 years now. I worked there for, what's that? Me too. I worked there about 14 years before I had the opportunity to come to Segrest. And when that opportunity comes up, you don't turn that down.
And that was a year. And I remember the very first time I came and you gave me a tour. I just walked around with my mouth wide open. I'd never seen a pet store like that before in my life. It's insane what they do there. And that's all parcel large in portion to you.
It's definitely, I think Rick is one of those people that, Rick Bruce, he's built on education and he's built on successful hobbyists. And he wants to go through that journey with everyone. And that's how he built his staff. And that's what he founded his store on. So you can see it.
What do you do with Segrest? What is your
Segrest.
What do you do?
Ooh, lots. Play with fish. So I was really honored to be able to have the opportunity. I was originally hired onto the sales team, which was an incredible experience. I thought I knew fish until I was introduced to the other 25,000 SKUs of fish I was not as familiar with. And really just a whole nother world when you get into that second stage of, the retail to the wholesale level. It's a different world, and it's great. And from there, I grew onto the marketing team, where I'm in charge of the brand management and the voice of the industry. And we have a couple of different branches of brand management, and I handle the educational outreach, the hobbyist outreach, and our social media.
So you bring to the fold our team of women. You have all the marketing. You've worked from the bottom entry level at the pet store all the way up to the top level at a pet store. And then you've migrated over to the wholesale side, and you started kind of somewhat at the bottom, and you've worked your way all up into a very top management type position where you're in charge of being the brand ambassador, correct?
Yep. We still scrub algae, though.
All right, let's bring another one on board here. Oh, this one doesn't even need an intro.
No.
Hi, everybody.
The absolute legend herself,
By the way.
Miss Sandy Moore.
Yep.
Now, Sandy sent me her bio, and it's like 27 pages long and all her accolades. So I wasn't even going to try and destroy that. I'll let her do it on her
It's
own.
pretty ridiculous. It is, but I've been doing this a long time, so it kind of just adds up, and there's stuff you forget.
Yep.
So like Shelby, been keeping fish, been around fish farms since I was a little girl, and some of my favorite memories are out in the retention ditches beside fish farms, out collecting mollies and guppies and things that were out there. But I don't know. Yeah, I like catching snakes and doing fish farm stuff ever since ever.
And since Biggs's last visit to Sandy's place, what is Sandy now getting into?
Isopods.
Sandy now has 6 tubs ready for isopods, and you just got your first isopod order. How many species did you get?
I did. Well, I got 3 today, and I have 3 more on order. And that's how it starts. It starts small, right?
No, never small isopods. You started with 6 containers.
Yes.
Small.
Go big or go home.
Where do you keep these isopod containers?
They're going to be in my bedroom.
Now, see,
where else would you keep them?
I know this is ladies' night, but that would not fly at home with my lady. That just wouldn't work. Wonderful. And this lovely lady we're going to bring on board next. This is the one and only. This is Dr. Denise Petty, doctor of veterinary medicine, specializing in aquaculture and fish. You've dealt not only with fish, but you deal with all marine life, all freshwater life, right?
Yes.
So we are very excited to have you on board with us, Denise. Thank you for taking part in this.
Well, thanks for having me.
Many questions that are going to come to you. And if you're game down the road, maybe you and me can do maybe a series of Ask the Vet. Maybe we could isolate individual topics and things, and maybe we could do something like that down the road, because I know it's happened in Canada already. And I when I was in Canada and I knew it was all happening, I ended up being in Kentucky, and I said to the people I was staying with, I says, I got to go to a pet store and take pictures and stuff. And when I went there, I was just as shocked that some of the legislations that are already in place in Canada are also starting to come in place in the U.S. as well. And
Yeah.
I understand the background behind them. I understand the need. But what really that's happening in tropical fish keeping, like people with their own home tanks, is they don't have any answers. They have no way of going around any of these things, because without any of these things available, they don't know what to do. So hopefully maybe you'll be able to shed some light on some of that stuff. So where do you ladies want to start? We got a bunch of people in the house already. I can't tell on StreamYards how many people are in the house. I don't know where it shows up on that. It shows up in YouTube. But we got a lot of people in the house here already. So thank you very much, guys. So what would you ladies like to start with? Do you want Biggs to ask questions?
Sure.
Sounds good.
So each of you have different branches of passions that you followed into the industry, but they all tie together. How important is it that your overall well-being of caring of the aquatic industry? Shelby gave me the questions.
Warm and fuzzies.
Who wants to take this one? Did Shelby write this question or did Sandy write this question?
No, Shelby did. And we do. We all have different ways that we came into the industry, but the health and the welfare of the animal really does come first for us. I think I deal a lot with legislation and with creating best management practices for the industry. Shelby does a lot with messaging out to the hobbyists, and then Dr. D is she is. We're not worthy because she has taught us so much about looking at animals in a different way and not as just treating them as a commodity, but treating them as living animals and making sure that we're doing the right thing by them.
Well, one of the things that was on Denise's resume was that she was actually at one point in time, years and years back, she was actually the staff veterinarian for Segrest.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you got to see stuff that you would normally never see in the field, I'm guessing there.
Yes, lots of fishes.
Now, the world's changed, and the world's just starting to come back together. None of us are certain where it's going to end up, or what life's actually going to be, what's the picture going to be like after this. But how have you guys fared with your day-to-day, not necessarily on your personal life, but on your professional lives? How has this pandemic affected you guys, and how do we see getting past it? Who wants to take that?
Shelby, you want to take that?
I think a lot of it has been great as far as people coming together. I think it's forced us to kind of reconnect with people, which is something I feel with these lovely little devices in our hands, we've kind of forgotten. So through this one, just not connecting with your family, but finding different ways to connect on social media, finding ways to support your local retailer has really just been, an overwhelming sense of kind of coming back to what the hobby was all about. So I think a biggest shift as far as, from the retailer to hobby side and from what we see as the wholesaler is that drive to be something creative, to be inspiring, to really just be a different kind of retailer and a different kind of supplier in order to adapt to that change.
Yeah. Because you think with all this time, everybody being locked in their house, you think this is the perfect time. I can do everything I want with my hobbies now, unlimited. And then they find out that they can't get any of the supplies they need. They can't go and get new fish. It's just one thing after another. Adele from Australia has posed a question on the super chat. She says, what has been your biggest challenge in the hobby and how did you overcome it? And that could apply to all three of you.
Dee, do you want to take that one? Would you rather not?
That's a tough one for me to answer because my approach is a little bit, perspective is different coming from fish health. So.
Have you ever kept an aquarium, like personally as a hobby, Denise?
Oh, that's what got me into, looking at fish. I started out in my veterinary life as an equine ambulatory veterinarian. And one day I had a cancellation and I had some time to kill. And I stopped at a fish store and fell in love with cichlids and set up a tank of Mbuna, which led to another tank, another tank. And then the next thing you know, I had fish tanks everywhere. So yes, I still keep fish. A variety of fishes. So
nice. Okay, well, I guess she won, so I guess we're over. I guess that's extreme. She likes cichlids. That's a win. How about you, Shelby?
I think there's different challenges as the journey through my, aquatic keeping has changed. I think one of the heartbreaking things is when you lose animals to something that was your fault, and you kind of feel like I should have known that, and it's hard to kind of look within yourself and say, okay, what could I have done different? And not to get disheartened with the hobby and continue, reach out to your friends, reach out to the staff at the store, all those mentors that you can reach out to find out what happened and pursue through that. So I'm sure that's happened to all of us. I had a 180-gallon burst, so I think we've all been through heartache, and it's just learning through that and then teaching other people how to not have that happen.
Yeah, keeping aquatics poses all sorts of other challenges than, say, keeping a dog or a cat or a horse or a cow or anything like that. All those animals are outside. We can do all this stuff. We can have a vet come to them or take them to a vet that thing pose. And that kind of ties in nice part and parcel with what's happening right now. In Canada, and as I'm sure it's happening in the States as well. And I'm going to relay a story that happened. And I know that my viewers have heard this story before, but this is what really drove it home, because I ended up fielding a phone call maybe a year or so ago asking me if I knew that all these fish medications were going to be taken off the shelf. This was from a retailer. and I don't sell any, I never sold any fish medications with the wholesale company that I work with. I knew it was eventually going to come because Canada is going to follow Europe. And in Europe, they followed suit with this stuff many, many years prior. They don't follow the silly states. We're different. But they took all these medications off the shelf. But the problem being is they left this wide open gate without any idea of how people are going to solve problems. And now, if you have, like Dr. Petty, you keep horses. You're an equine vet as well, right? You keep horses yourself?
I do.
Okay, so you're very, very passionate about horses and stuff, and you understand horses, but you also help people as an equine vet. Now, if my horse isn't doing something right or it doesn't look right, I'm going to jump on it right away and I'll be able to take care of stuff. But when you talk about keeping fish in a glass box, well, it's a $7.99 fish, it's a $12.99 fish, or it's a 99-cent fish. The urgency to other people outside of that, oh, it's just a fish. But to us, those are our pets, like Shelby said. These are dear to us, and they're just as important as a horse or the most purebred animal imaginable. But the problem being is that, especially in Canada, and that's why I'm assuming there's probably going to be questions come through from people, and maybe we can answer, maybe we won't be able to, maybe it'll be a topic for later, is we don't have a solution. All they did was take everything off and say, go to a vet. Well, that's fine and dandy. But in Canada, if there's a fish vet in Canada, I don't know who they are, but I guarantee you they're not going to be in Manitoba or Saskatchewan or Alberta. They'll be in Vancouver for fisheries or the aquarium. They maybe there's something in Southern Ontario because there's public aquariums and stuff. And then there may be something on the far East Coast for fisheries and stuff there. But there's nobody at all that specializes in fish medicine in Canada that I know of. So taking it to your vet, basically all I'm going to do now is if I have a sick something or other, I'm going to research it. I'm going to probably know what it is. I have the abilities and microscopes and things like that at home that I can kind of do self-diagnosis, and I can provide a very detailed information to my veterinarian, and they're probably just going to take my word for it and give me the medication I need. And that's wrong still. That to me is no different than being able to buy a pack for $8.99 of tetracycline at the pet store and just taking it off the shelf. To me, that's not a solution. So I don't know what the answer is going to be. You guys have any opinion on that?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with what's happening with the Canadian vets there, but here in the U.S., we have an American Association of Fish Veterinarians, which is actually pretty new. If you were a fish vet, we had to belong to, like I'm a member of the American Veterinary Medical Association. I'm also a member of the American Fisheries Society, which has a fish health section. There's the World Aquatic Veterinary Medical Association. And finally, we have our own group, like most veterinarians who specialize have their own group. And so we do have a website that has a directory where people can find a vet locally. I don't know if Canadian vets participate in it or not, but that might be something to look into. And so we have probably a much wider network of fish veterinarians in the U.S. than people realize.
Yeah. All right. What other questions we got for you guys? Is there anybody out there that has questions for these lovely ladies? Because we have a long list of questions. We can keep going on these. But if somebody has a specific question, by all means, post it. What else we're going to go? Now, did any of you guys, the reason I wanted to do this is I want to do a focus on women in the industry. Not just women in the industry, but women that have gone from, I keep one fish tank and I'm going to a fish club and I'm treated like I'm lesser than anybody else because it's a boys club sort of thing. And I'm a dad. I got four daughters, not 8, thankfully. I only got 4 daughters, but I want to set the best example I can for them that they can be whatever they want to be. And that's why I wanted to find 3 very, very powerful women. Apparently I can have up to 6 people on the feed. Then it's going to start looking like the Brady Bunch thing at the beginning. That's what I was going to go after. So, but when you guys started out, did you have any hesitation starting your journey into the hobby, knowing there was not going to be a lot of women participants?
No, I think that's exactly the reason why you go after it. It's because it's the road less traveled.
Good answer. Take no prisoners, right, Sandy?
Right.
Well, y'all have very different experiences in the hobby, as do I. But what are some of your most memorable moments that helped you build you as the leader that you are in your field today? See, we need the Jeopardy clock, but we can't have the Jeopardy clock.
I've got a couple. I've got the expedition I took in Brazil with Project Piaba really changed how I thought about the sourcing of wild animals, because I was pretty against it before I went on that expedition, and now I am completely for the collection, the sustainable collection of wild animals, because it has so many benefits to the environment. And then the other one was legislative and kind of gathering the industry together around a potential listing on the Endangered Species Act for fish, and that was pretty game changing.
How about you, Shelby? Anything?
Yeah, for me, with the retail experience and the marketing experience I've had throughout my career, success became addictive. And I'm not talking about my personal success. I'm talking about watching someone grow through their hobby.
She doesn't have personality whatsoever, does she, Sandy? No, not at all. You're one of the most hungry people I've ever met.
Yeah, because it takes weeks to build a tank. It takes, months to stock the tank. So when you take someone through that and you've been with them on their year-long journey of their tank, you kind of become addicted to someone else's success in that, you were part of that feeling. So you kind of carry that with you, and that kind of builds your leadership because you want to share that with that person. And sometimes it was neat to even see those people grow into staff members at the store. That was kind of that really kind of next step that was like, wow, because of the relationships that you cultivated in the beginning, this person may now take a step in the industry that wouldn't have been there.
Yeah. Dr. Petty, anything?
Well, I don't think of myself as a leader, but when I was at the university, I got to work with a lot of veterinary students who want to do what I do. Their goal is to, do exactly what I do. So I was able to spend a lot of time working with small groups, mostly women, and that's probably one of the more important things I think I've done.
Now there's an organization, or I guess a Facebook group page called Girls for Fish. And I'm a member of that group, and I'm very honored because I remember when they sent me the notice, I said, I don't know if I really fit your criteria. I'm more of a twig and berries kind of girl. They said, we're opening it up to everybody and stuff, and we want you to bring your people in and stuff. So I think that's probably how Sandy got in. I got a bunch of people. I just sent a bunch of notices about it, and it's a wonderful group of people and stuff. But one of them is one of the founders, Nicole Johnson. She mentioned something here that up in Vermont when she went to school, she was she studied veterinary medicine for a bit, not in Vermont, veterinary medicine. And there was equine or farm, but she said fish was never even an option for her. And that's the challenge. It's just not available to a lot of people. They don't know it as it's there. It's an entire industry that I don't even think has been challenged yet.
Well, the University of Florida was probably one of the few universities that hired a fish veterinarian right off the bat. I think, I don't know when. And now there's a number of veterinarians that graduate, and I was one of several faculty that specialized in aquatic medicine, and they have a online fish disease course. In fact, it's running right now that I've been helping with for a number of years. So there's programs out there. North Carolina, the vet school there also has a really good program for veterinarians who want to do fish. PEI, Prince Edward Island, is also really good. And there's others, UC Davis, and more are trying to add it, but pretty much it has to be a state that has some aquaculture going on. Otherwise, there's just not that much interest otherwise.
Yeah, I don't hear much about the fish program at the University of South Dakota. Now, there was I want to hear I'd highlighted here, and it's kind of in part and parcel with something somebody in the chat just asked. If you could tell your younger self anything useful about the hobby, what would it be and why?
Do what makes you happy.
Mine would be run. Don't eat fish, stupid. It's a dangerous slope.
Mm-hmm.
How about you, Shelby?
I think exploring, do what makes you happy. If keeping goldfish in your 50 gallon is what makes you happy, then, embrace that hobby. There are going to be people that think that's silly, or guppies, or any of the craziest, rarest cichlid you can find. Whatever that passion is, follow that, because that will lead you into other things you've never thought of. So I think sometimes we shy away from what other people may think due to, some of those stereotypical animals. But if that's what makes you happy, that's what this hobby is all about.
We just asked Shelby, and she's got to be, what, 20 now? You know? So,
You're such a sweetheart. I met you like 20 years ago.
well, put the question down to Dr. Petty and Sandy, who are probably 30, 35 now, and we'll see what they think about what they could teach somebody that would be in their younger and why. Come on, Sandy.
I don't know. That's a tough one. I would say to walk through the fear more. Walk through, it doesn't matter so much whether or not people like you. Do the right thing even when no one is looking. Things like that. And I would also, what I would have told myself as a child, I wish I had paid more attention to some of the characters in the fish farm world, even though they're super crazy people, but they were a lot of fun, and I miss them.
I can agree with that. I've met many of them. That's a different
great
world down there. That sounds like a show that should be on like those reality shows, like Pawn Stars and stuff like that, or those guys that go and catch gators for a living. They should just have fish farm stories.
Oh no.
Sandy, you can pitch that to Discovery Channel. We'll leave that to you.
Oh yeah.
Big Rich from Ohio Fish Rescues here, and he says, I tell myself to learn the cycle and why you should know the parameters, so you know when is factual time to change water, not just because my buddy does it 30% every month.
Good point.
Yeah. I always find that funny that I remember all the years when I first started working in pet stores when I was really young, is they teach you how to test water, but they wouldn't give you any of the science or the meaning behind what you were doing. So you could talk to a lot of aquarists today and they'll know that ammonia in their tank is bad and nitrates in the bad, but they don't understand any aspect of the actual physical science that is happening about these things. They just know that they had 7 drops of this to this vial, and that's it. And if it turns the wrong color, it's bad. They do a water change. Now, the other part of that question was, is there anything in your experience or advice that you'd like to share with women looking to get into your industry? Now, we got a couple of different industries, but they're somewhat tied together.
I think Sandy brought up a good point as to, to be a little bit fearless and to, be bold and, make those leaps that traditionally aren't there. I think that's a lot of, women have a lot of things that they can do and a lot of different things that they can offer, different perspectives. So don't be afraid to step into a world that's not yours.
Back in the day when I was younger and everything was still in black and white, TV shows like Archie Bunker were on TV and stuff like that. And you look at the political climate today, like those things wouldn't fly back then at all. Like back today, they would never fly now. So what else we got?
You'd have to grow some thick skin.
Yep. You guys have done pretty well. You guys, as you grow in your careers, did you guys have mentors?
Yes.
I'm guessing Shelby's would be Rick Pruce would be one of them. Am I right?
Yeah, a lot of people. Rick was my initial mentor. Actually, my parents were. They really and truly cultivated, the beginning of it. Before Google, we had books. We looked through those books. We called stores and we did, shop hopping. And that was one of our favorite Sunday activities. So you really gained mentorship through that. And then certainly, as I got to grow within the Pruce family, getting to know people like Sandy and people at Segrest and the ACA, you just get to expand so much into a world that there's so many people willing to help you, grasp onto that and hold on to your tank.
Now, Dr. Petty, in all your years of working with the fish farms and stuff, are you still involved with helping fish farms with your career today?
Oh, yes.
Okay. What would you say is the biggest challenge for aquaculture on your standpoint in today's market? Is there one thing, like I remember talking with Dr. Tom Walczyk. We talked about koi herpes virus and all the different viruses that affected koi and goldfish and stuff. And those some of the work that he was involved with was groundbreaking work for that industry. Mm-hmm. Is there something? I know diseases and parasites and pathology, they're all evolving all the time. Is there something that's kind of on the horizon, something that's causing a lot of challenges right now in the industry?
Oh, yeah. Well, several pathogens there. I can think of, viruses that are, if we aren't careful, they're going to be some big problems. There are some bacterial diseases that we didn't used to see very often, and now they're kind of much more common. I don't know, proper use of chemicals, we may start seeing some parasite resistance, which we definitely don't want to see. There's tons of parasites that a lot of people don't even know about. They know the common ones, but there's so many more, and some that cannot be treated no matter what. There's some a fungal parasite that the only answer is depopulation. And so
that's a nice way of saying it, I guess.
yeah, there is no treatment for it. If you talk with some of the zebrafish researchers, they see a lot of these same things in their research facilities. I don't think the average hobbyist knows about a lot of them, but they're out there, and you just cannot be too careful.
Yeah, I've heard, I've been to a lot of fish farms, maybe not as many as you guys, but I've been to a lot of fish farms, and I've always been just glaringly shocked at the use of chemicals. Knowing full well that the water they're going to get to use on their fish farm is 6 feet below their feet. They're just pouring these toxic chemicals into the water, thinking it's just going to solve the problem, and then it just filters away, and then it comes back, and it's okay. Notice one thing I did notice is I've never seen a fish farmer take water from their tap to drink, ever. Now, the biggest challenge I think we see up here in Canada, the one that I think any Canadian fish keeper would agree, is Calamanus. That is without a doubt the one that is the biggest plague for us, because it comes out of all the Asian farms, any of the mud farms, and by the time you're going to see the parasite, it's already too late for treatment usually, right? And when you take away all the medications for treating it, it makes it a little more challenging, because that's not something you're going to be able to treat without proper medications, correct?
What was the name of it again?
Calamanus, am I saying it right? The little brown worms that come out the butt, very prolific.
Yeah, Camelanus.
Camelanus, there we go.
Yeah, I had to say that word.
Two of his southern teeth. So just look at him. You got to expect a certain level from this guy.
Yeah, there's a whole family of those guys.
And they're really challenging to treat even with medications by the time you notice it, right?
Well, yeah, I think they go underdiagnosed a lot. Normally, when I see them, I only see 1 or maybe 2 per fish. I just don't know what happens when the fish is going elsewhere. I rarely see heavy numbers of them, but that doesn't mean it can't occur for sure.
Yeah. How about you, Shelby? What do you see on the farm side? Like when you're importing fish, do you see that very often?
I may have Sandy kind of take that because I'm a little, removed from that part of our business. And Sandy certainly has more experience in that as far as the farm side of it.
Yeah, just throwing it on Sandy. I like that.
Oh,
Girls
okay.
getting dirty.
So challenges of receiving imported fish, of what new things are happening on the horizon.
Yes.
I mean, of course, right now we have severely restricted air freight capacity because of COVID, and that's not going to change anytime soon. I'm not traveling internationally anytime soon, and I don't know a lot of people that are going to be. But so for us, what we see long term is we see the farming community, the existing farming community is aging out, and we are actively searching for new emerging nations to transfer that aquaculture technology to. It requires good water, and it also requires rather cheap labor. So it becomes more difficult for first world nations to farm efficiently.
Well, I wonder how many farms, I'm sure, there's got to be some of the smaller individual farms in Florida that won't survive from this whole pandemic thing because they've had nowhere to sell their wares at all.
Well, actually, we've run most of them out of fish now. Or they are running out of fish, right? Because there's not a lot of imports coming in from Asia.
Okay. So it's been good.
But normally, I mean, the average fish farmer in Florida right now is in excess of 65 years old, and there's not many second or third generation farmers because I mean, honestly, it's a really hard job. Yep. And if you can do something else, most people want to do something else. It's hard, and you just don't make a lot of money.
Yeah, anybody that's ever raised fish in a fish tank thinks that, oh, let's go glorious, just wandering around in shorts and a t-shirt with some concrete bats and a mud in-ground pond. This is so easy. The money
so glamorous.
They have no idea. And reality is almost anybody that takes goes from that side of it and says, I'm going to make a run at it, they almost invariably always fail because they just do not comprehend the amount of work that's involved.
Yeah.
So like what Shelby pointed to earlier, like the things that, like when we have something that happens in our care and it was directly our fault, that's one aquarium. Now extrapolate that onto 12 ponds. And I know it's happened with many fish farmers that do in-ground farming, where all of a sudden you have a hurricane come through and you're a guppy breeder and you might have 3 million guppies on your farm. But when the hurricane comes through and drops 3 feet of water on your ground, all those ponds become one. You have 0 guppies now because they're all garbage. They're all feeder guppies, right? And that's a challenge that they've got to face as well.
Yeah.
That's
I think they solved that through a lot of best management practices. There's a lot of protocols we try and put in place with our farmers to prevent that as well. So I think, just as there's learning curves in fish keeping in aquariums, it's the same on the farm end too. And certainly every farmer has their own secret, and it's a challenge.
Yep. I'm just going to check, see if there's been any questions, because I really haven't been paying attention to the questions here. I'm a bad moderator. Normally I have moderators here, but I don't have any today. Oh, well, it's all good. So now you guys have noticed Shelby and Sandy probably better at answering this one here, but the industry's constantly changing, right? You guys, every person that's out there that's in this industry, you're always looking for something new, a new color of something that's been established. Damn well there's some guys in Asia right now that are working with the electric yellow cichlid, and they're doing anything they can to make that fish purple. And if they're the first one to come up with that purple electric yellow, they'll make their million, right? And that's what the whole industry is driven on. We've seen all these different long-finned fish, which usually are always usually horribly mean fish that they turn long-fin. I've never understood that. And then the advent of those glowfish, which is an absolute exceptional fish that for the aquatic trade, because it brings so many people into the industry that may never well have ever been exposed to it before. And then the big trend that's come up in the past, 5-10 years has been aquascaping. I never heard of that term, aquascaping, before. You just decorated an aquarium, and just some were really, really stunning, and some were like, okay, a couple of plants and a SpongeBob ornament. But this aquascaping thing that took the world by storm, these guys have taken it to an art form, and most of these tanks aren't even practical for keeping fish in. But you guys are the leaders in this. Biggs is just a little tiny peon in this chess game. He's just watching what's happening. But as leaders and people that have been at the forefront of this, what do you forecast seeing that's coming in the industry for changes? What's the next big wave? We've got glowfish, we've got aquascaping. What do you foresee is next?
I mean, what's trending right now is actually larger tanks, 30 gallons and above, which is great news for the first-time hobbyists, of course, because I don't know. For me, it is much more difficult to keep a smaller tank than it is a larger tank. We're seeing semi-aggressive planet tanks are trending. But we're still, nano is just enormous, and I don't see that backing off at any time either.
Cool.
Yay! Rachel O'Leary says, "Hello, Miss Rachel." And actually, she kind of prompted a thought. I think it's not always the new fish, the new blue or yellow or purple fish. Biotopes and people being aware of where their fish come from, even just in the 6 years I've been at Segrest, that's become increasingly more important to the hobbyists. They want to know where that fish was sourced, was it sustainable, which I think is kind of an incredible part of our journey in this hobby. And I love to see that. So people are becoming much more in touch with, the natural approach, as well as the SpongeBob approach too. But they really, truly care about, where the animal came from, how was it raised, and how is it going to do in their home.
Yeah, having never been to Segrest before the last time I was down, I really didn't know what my expectations were. I really didn't. I never talked to Sandy about it or you. I never knew. And I still remember vividly that first day when I walked through the warehouse. I honestly expected it to be, rooms and rooms and rooms of all the bread and butter fish, because of basically who your base clientele is. But when I walked through those buildings and I saw there was at least half a dozen fish that I pointed out to Shelby and Sandy, there's fish I've never even seen before. But people don't get it. You're not a fish farm. you're the largest wholesaler in North America, and you're importing fish from every country that has tropical fish all over the world, both fresh and marine. That's the video I told Sandy today. I basically was working on 2 videos in the past 2 days. That was one of them. And I think I spent about 7 or 8 hours editing videos. And I don't know what happened to them. My laptop crashed and the raw forms of those are gone. I still have all the little videos, but I have to completely start over from scratch. And that's what made me think of it, was those African arowanas. I don't think I've ever seen one of those. I remember OFR, Ohio Fish Rescue, had one in a tank years ago, and it was like the coolest thing I'd ever seen. And then you had like 2 of them in a tank at the shop. That was just crazy to me. But you still had all the bread and butter. You had all that stuff, because you guys don't handle just brick and mortar pet stores. You're handling zoos all over. You're handling public aquariums. You guys are doing everything. Okay, now with all you guys have been in this industry. Sandy talked about when she was younger, she was playing in the ditches of Florida. I know in the ditches of Florida, there's other things besides mollies. There's bad stuff in those ditches. Shelby's tough. She comes from near Detroit.
Can I do it? Can I do it on here?
Yeah, every day she had to decide which bandana she wanted to wear to school to bank she was affiliated with. And Dr. Petty, I'm sure in all your experiences with all your stuff and dealing with everything, freshwater, marine, and all the different animals you guys have probably had some pretty incredible animal encounters. Anybody want to tell a story about an animal encounter? Go ahead.
I thought of one back in the old days at Segrest when the systems were different. I was sometimes fish will escape, and we had large sumps, and we had a catwalk over the sump, and I was going through some fish that were being held because they had some fin damage or something like that. And I was evaluating them and moving them to tanks where they could be sold if they had recovered. And I happened to drop one, and an arowana, a silver arowana that must have been, I think it was about 2 feet long, leaped up out of the water, completely surprising me, and grabbed that fish before I could do anything with it. Not something you normally get to experience, and you have to be in the wild, but I could be right there in Florida and have an arowana jump out right in front of me.
You ever been bitten by an arowana? It's like
no.
sticking your finger in a car door. They just have 2 bony plates that come together. They have little tiny teeth, but it's just, it's not fun. How about you, Sandy? You must have had some sort of encounter in the wild outside of Molly.
Sure. I think the funny stories to me all revolve around snakes at the farm. They're like, we'd have snakes get loose from it used to be the reptile room. And we'd have, the guy come in to fill up the Coke machine, and there'd be a red-tailed boa bound up around the coin dispenser. He wasn't happy about that. We had when reptiles was out in the hole in freshwater years and years and years ago, when we had 4-height glass tanks, we had an anaconda get loose, and Dot, who used to work for us, is so deathly afraid of snakes. She got up on top of the 4-height tanks, and I don't know. They were like 8-10 feet in the air. Got up on there, waiting for somebody to come and get this anaconda down. And and one time, got a shipment from Africa, and I don't know why, but they decided to send us a crate full of cobras.
Why?
I don't know, but Elwyn had to deal with them.
Only in Florida does stuff like that happen. I remember being in Homestead at one of the farms that's near in Homestead that was near to one of the farmers I was working with. You had to go pick up some equipment, and this guy had aluminum sheds, just those crappy little aluminum outdoor sheds all over his property, and inside were these frameworks of 2x4s and little Rubbermaid tubs that just slid into the slots, and each one of them had a cobra.
Wow.
He had Florida's largest venom extraction for a lapids contract. And I'm like, you guys are worried about when a hurricane hits Florida. And that's clearly the reason the Burmese pythons are out there. Yes. We're not going to talk about it. It's irresponsible pet owners. But what do you think is going to happen when a few of those little cobra sheds get blown away? That's
Nobody knew.
a bigger problem than any of your Burmese pythons are ever going to be. Let's see if there were some questions here from the group. What is something you think needs to be changed or evolve in the hobby? Now, well, the biggest change I think that I've noticed is the fact about the medications. And I think that needed to be changed. I don't think the change of removing the medications has gone full circle yet to the point that the aquarists that need these medications to use them responsibly have the channels to be able to access them. So I think that's what that needs to evolve. But do you guys have any thoughts of what else needs to change? You got to remember, I want to point out again that Shelby sent me all these questions. The bulk of these questions came from her.
So one of the changes that's taking place that I'd like to see is kids. It is increasingly difficult to get younger children into this industry, into this hobby. So I think the importance of zoos and aquariums to build that inspiration of what the aquatic industry is all about is huge. I think getting to your local pet store, your fish club, your teachers having aquariums, coming back around to that, I think just, without this generation coming up away from these devices, into fish tanks, we're going to have a challenge, in 10 to 20 years. So what does that look like without that generation being involved?
And more importantly, kits that have the right equipment, not driven based solely on price, like the ones that are in the big box stores that aren't pet stores. You guys, without saying the name, we know what we're talking about. But just because they want to sell an aquarium, they want to be cheaper than everybody else. So the manufacturers have bent over and accepted that and made products that are not conducive for proper fish keeping. You're guaranteeing failure for every single person that buys one of those. That's not helping the industry at all. You're right. How about you, Sandy? What needs to change or evolve? Bigs.
I think it can be a really overwhelming hobby to get into, which is maybe why people avoid it, because we have overcomplicated fish keeping. It comes down to some very, very basic principles that I think manufacturers, I couldn't even read through instructions from the manufacturers of setting up the kit and the nitrification cycle. I think that we need to make it more simple and speak to people like they're human at, whatever point that they're at, and be supportive of them instead of, I'm sure other people have had this experience where the first time you go into a club and people talk down to you, and I'm sure that I have been guilty of that myself. So helping people up and be successful would be great.
I see not a question, but more of a statement. One of the women in our chat, Nancy Engleton, she is the president of KOAC, which is the Canadian Association of Aquarium Clubs. She's a
go there this year.
That's right.
I was supposed to go there this year.
She's a wonderful, wonderful woman. She goes, Chris, just so you know, the medication changes in Canada are all my fault, as I'm told in the hate mail that I get regarding this subject. If you're getting hate mail, send it to me as well, because Nancy, I 100% support the fact that these medications are removed from general people, because as you pointed out, I believe Dr. Petty pointed out, is fish are starting to get these natural, they're immune to stuff. And somebody was told, it might have been Sandy when we were together when I was down there, that they're finding fish in Brazil caught out of the wild that have disease resistance to antibiotics already. Now, the only way they're getting that is that means these chemicals are being used in such large concentrations in any of these holding stations that these chemicals are being washed into the water, and through generations and generations and concentrations building up, these fish are developing an immunity to it. That is insanely scary. If that doesn't drive it home for people to think about it, in Brazil, in the Amazon, that these chemicals are in such a high enough concentration that the animals are evolving an immunity to the diseases that these chemicals are designed to fight. This is one of the largest areas of fresh water in the world, and it's poisoned. Theoretically, that's what it is. It's poisoned, and yet that water supply supports how many millions of people? That's crazy to me. So
well, it goes beyond that. I mean, we have waterways here in the States where fishes that are living in it, like brown bullhead catfishes develop all kinds of weird cancers.
Yeah.
Some of the centrarchids have become intersex, which is where they have both ovary and testes, which for that particular fish is not natural at all. I've seen that in cobia down in the Caribbean that are intersex, and they shouldn't be intersex at all. And it's not just, certainly, indiscriminate use of chemicals in the aquarium hobby is a problem, but it's also us humans taking our own drugs and not using them correctly. We're a huge part of the problem too. So there is a reason why the governments are getting strict. The FDA in 2017 that took all of the antibiotics that used to be over the counter for food fish use. They're now under what's called a veterinary feed directive. And so you have to have a prescription with a veterinarian, and there's all kinds of guidelines that go along with that. And that is the only legal way to use these drugs in feed. So, and they did it because of the problem. It's actually global. It's not just, in Brazil, it's everywhere.
When you're getting in the chat, you're getting a lot of support for your comments there, Dr. Petty, because everyone's agreeing with you. Now, some of my viewers may not want to hear the story again, but I'm telling them the story anyway. This is the way that it drove it home for me, and I must have got sidetracked before because I didn't tell you. But Dr. Petty will love this the most. I'm completely a city person. I look nothing like a farmer. And we moved from the city to a farm 5 years ago. It wasn't a farm. It was just a rural property because my wife wanted to own 5 chickens. That 5 chickens became many more chickens. Now we've got coon pigs or coony pigs, and we've got Highland cattle, and we've had goats. And we had a litter of piglets that were born of this rare breed of coony pigs. And my wife phoned me one day while I was away on the road, because I'm usually away 2 weeks out of every month. And she says, there's a problem with the pigs, the babies. And the only thing we do for the babies is they get their iron shot. That's the only thing they do, because ours are born in winter. Normally in the summertime, if they're born, they don't need the iron shot because they'll eat mud and they'll get iron that way. But we give them their iron shot, and that's basically about it. But what happened is one of these pigs started getting sick, according to her. So we did what any really concerned, well-knowing person would do. We went to Facebook, and my wife typed out a message on one of the forums on Facebook describing her version of the problems with these pigs, and the experts poured in. They gave us so many ideas about what was wrong with these pigs, and basically they had pneumonia. This is completely just from an average pig keeper just saying, that's what you got, pneumonia, And one person even went further to say, well, I've got the medications you need, and for $20, bring some clean syringes and you can come and get the medications measured out to the weight of your animals. So my wife tells me all this. She doesn't want to go and get it. So when I land back at home, I have to go home. There's a $20 bill sitting on the table and 4 empty syringes. And I had to drive about 20 minutes to meet the woman. And her job was, she was in charge of the dump in the small town next to me. And she had a small wooden shack off the side of the dump. And I had to go meet her and knock on the door. And I went in, and she pulled all these dirty bottles of medicines out of her cabinet, put them on the table. And then she told me, she says, well, I'm not a vet, so you have to decide which one you want. And I'm like, wow. So then my science brain, I'm not a vet or a doctor by any means, but I have a ton of biological ichthyology behind me and botanical science. So all of a sudden that brain had to click in, and I'm reading all these labels, and I'm trying to figure out which is the lesser evil here. And I'm reading all these things, and I'm like, obviously I have to go home with one because I'm going to be in trouble otherwise. So I picked what I thought was the best one that made the most sense. It came out as this neon green goo, something out of a kid's cartoon. And I had 4 syringes in my sweaty hand ready to go home for my wife. And I phoned her as soon as I left, and I said, we're not doing this. We're just not doing this at all. We're not doing this. And we got home and we looked into it. And basically all of a sudden a light bulb went off. The guy that was the pig breeder we had that we got the adults from told us that in the wintertime he removes water. And he takes water away because the pigs will adapt and they'll eat snow. Not as hydrating as water, but apparently that worked for him. The babies didn't know that they were supposed to eat snow because we never told them they were supposed to eat snow. And apparently they didn't read the manual about eating snow. So basically the pigs were dehydrated. We gave them a water dish, and the next day they were fine. But if that's not a reason to remove all hardcore antibiotic drugs off the market, I don't know what is. I'm not talking fish. I'm talking, you're an equine vet as well. But like on the farm and feed stores where I call on for customers and stuff, that was a big issue as well. And all those things were pulled off the shelf because hobby farmers were just using them indiscriminately as they saw fit. And like, these are things you're going to eat. I don't know if I want those chemicals in the animal I'm going to eat. What else we got? Anybody else?
I wanted to comment. Nancy said she follows Rachel's methods of salt baths in quarantine.
Yeah, I'm a very, very strong advocate of using salt and heat. Always have my whole life. I did a video when I did that video, I think it was entitled Medication Legislation. It was about a year ago when I did it. I put it out at the end of the video. If people watched it to the end, I gave a bunch of recipes of things that you can do at home using hydrogen peroxide, using Epsom salt, and all these different things that were very, very prophylactic or ways of treating a lot of the common problems we were associated with. But when it comes to something like using salt, you get all these new millennials that jump on the boat and go, salt doesn't work for ick. Well, I'm sorry, ick is still cured at 86.2 or 86.6 degrees or whatever. It doesn't live past that. So if you crank the temperature to that point slowly and get it to that temperature and add salt, you're going to solve the problem. You just have to be a bit more diligent and actually watching. And people like all of you who are, long-term aquarists, you guys would all agree that I've even worked on the large-scale wholesale side, and most of these diseases, like ick and things like that, or parasites, I guess, you will notice behavioral changes long before you're going to see a problem. And if you make the adjustments at that stage, you won't have said problem. I've only ever, honestly, in my entire 45 years of keeping fish, I think I've only ever had ick twice. And they've always completely been my fault. I've had tanks of cichlids where I forgot the automatic water changer on, and it pours straight 52-degree well water, full tilt into the aquarium until I turn it off because it wasn't fully automated. I made a couple of videos on it because it happened twice. And I dropped the tank of a Central American cichlid tank that was at 82 or 78 or whatever it was around 80, down to about 58 degrees. There was condensation on the outside of the glass. All I did was turn off the water changer, did a quick little prayer, thinking all fish are going to be dead the next morning. And slowly, gradually, the water temperature came up on its own. And honestly, I never had it with any of those fish either. And it happened twice. I do cold water changes on all my fish all the time. Never had the problem. I think a lot of people coddle their fish too much, and that might be a problem that's happening right now with the pandemic. Feeding fish more than we should. We're doing more maintenance on the tank. We're stressing the fish out more than we should. That's going to just cause more problems.
I think you bring up a good point with stress. I think a lot of it's simplified in a nutshell is providing the right environment for the animal when you receive them. Whether it be at the wholesale level or whether you take it home from your store, making sure your parameters are correct, but also if it's an animal that appreciates black water or, providing those kind of steps and those stages for the animal to settle into when they come under stress or transport, I think is huge for their long-term success and avoiding those potential pathogens that they can be susceptible to under those conditions.
Yeah, I agree. Now, all of you guys are obviously very, very passionate about your careers. Otherwise, you wouldn't be in these careers for the long terms like we have been. And you love what you do. Do any of you guys start on an entirely different path before getting into this? Now, Shelby, you're only like 20, so you don't really count here.
In between fish, I thought I was going to do something different. I went to school for a little while for graphic design and decided that computers and I are not friends. I'm on your team for that, as you can tell by tonight. So I worked for a car dealership selling cars and detailing cars, which was a great experience, but not where my passion lied.
So you sold cars on like 8 Mile?
Similar, yes.
I can't even imagine what that is.
Detailing the cars was more fun. That was a much more meticulous job I enjoyed. And then my next job was cruises, so that was it.
How about you, Sandy?
I didn't think I wanted to be in the fish farm business. I wanted to be a businesswoman. And then I worked at Dun & Bradstreet, and then I came back to fish. I'm glad I had that outside experience so I could apply it to our facility.
Yeah. Dr. Petty?
Well, of course, I started out as an equine vet, which I've already mentioned. And since I've been doing fish medicine, I've had a number of different jobs, but I've always done fish. It's taken me, a lot of different places. I've got to see a lot of different things. And, I don't know, I'll be doing fish until I retire.
So I got a question from the field here.
No retiring. No.
No.
No, you're here for the long term. We need you. We need more of you. What you guys have done with the glowfish is you should now start, because Canada was so long to get on the boat for glowfish because it's a genetically modified animal. So what we should be looking at next is in the States. You guys want to be the leader and stuff. You should look at cloning humans. And we could start with fish vets. We'll just start cloning fish vets and just sending them out to all over the areas of the world that are lacking fish vets. So there's a question here from James Green. He says, what is the solution for areas of the world where no prescription is needed even for humans? And that's an example. My parents lived in Colombia, South America for years. And you went to the pharmacy and you could buy any medication you want. You just tell them what you need and they get it for you. But she says an animal feed by foreign companies may add numerous medications. So how is that impact? Because look, we can put all the legislation that we want in place, but third world countries where a lot of fish are coming from, that way part of the parts where the problem's starting.
Oh yeah.
And I would agree with that. So what we've done for a very long time is we go and audit our suppliers and learn who their farmers are, and we on a weekly basis are telling them what problem they're having with which of their fish, as we get that information from our lab staff and from Dr. Petty, and sending that information back to them, because and sometimes they listen, and then there are times where sometimes they don't, and because they're the only one raising that specific type of fish. I can think of one specifically that's driving me crazy, that has driven me crazy for 10 years, but nobody else wants to raise those fish, but that's definitely a problem, and we try to control it as best as we can. If we have other options, we use those other options if they're not willing to change.
So one of the questions I have here is, what are some of the best animals you would recommend starting with? Now, Shelby provided that question. That's a pretty general question, because are we talking just a fish tank? Well, then we obviously know some of the bread and butter fish are the best starters, but there might be some new contenders with, right? Obviously, we want to have the biggest aquarium possible if we're going to talk about fish. How do you guys want to take that? How about Sandy? Throw you under the boat.
I said, yes, start with something. How about that? Start with something that you like and that you're passionate about.
Yeah.
Like isopods?
Like isopods. And only start with only 6 varieties, because any more than that would be excessive.
Yeah, that'd be problematic. Over 6 is out.
Right. I can get 2 more like in 2 weeks, but today it's only 6.
Shelby, what would you say, like all your years working in the retail side, bread and butter stuff, but if you could have in a perfect world, what would you recommend for everybody starting with?
Knowledge. And so that's kind of where I pose that question is, you hear this term starter fish all the time. And when I'd bring a new person into the hobby, roping them down to, well, this is a starter fish. You can only start with a zebra Daniel, a platy, a molly, because those are the hardy ones. That's true. You don't want to, guide those people to the more resilient animals. But if they're not passionate about that particular fish, you kind of lose them in the beginning. So giving them the knowledge to care for the animals that they are passionate about, teaching them what those animals need to care for with each stage, to me, that's a starter fish, and knowing what that animal needs, setting up the environment, and going from there. So it's kind of a different take on what to start with is that.
See, my answer would be get a gerbil.
They're great. Gerbils are a lot of fun. That's a fun, active. They're not nocturnal. They do well in colonies.
Don't start down this path. There's a couple of questions from the audience. What are your favorite aquatic pets you've ever kept or even seen? I know Sandy's favorite.
I know mine.
Yeah. and that is the toucan tetra.
Oh, I love those little toucan tetras, but my life goal is to have an Asian arowana. I want it to be legal in the United States.
No Asian arowana for you. We have them in Canada, and they're too plentiful. We McDonald's might even introduce the Mick arowana.
Like very much right now.
How about you, Shelby?
Ooh, favorite animal. I mean, I'm a cichlid girl at heart. I walked into Bruce's before I was even working there, and there was a bluefish. And I asked Rick, I said, what is that? And he said, that's a cichlid. And that kind of sums up my 22 years of having fish tanks so far. So the Placidochromis phenochylis is my baby. I've never really kind of burned on a Malawi. I think there's a ton of interesting facts about the Rift Lakes, and I just can't get enough of the cichlids.
The bluefish, basically, is what you're saying. The bluefish
looks like a living Monet painting. How can you not love that animal?
So my interest in fish has always been one thing and one thing only. I view fish as a puzzle. And every single fish that I've ever kept, I've just got to figure out the pieces of the puzzle to make that species reproduce to its possibility. I don't want to just eke it by and get free fry. I want every species to reproduce to kind of its average yield. And then I view it as a success. And then I get rid of that fish and move on to the next. And I honestly have never really kept much in Malawi. Some of them are absolutely breathtaking. I've spent so many years going down to a lot of the Florida farms, and some of them just do some outstanding African cichlids. I know Shelby and Sandy, you've been to many of those farms as well. So it's hard not actually falling in love with those fish. But from a breeding standpoint, they're kind of boring. They all breed exactly the same way from Lake Malawi. That drives me insane. Like I know if you're a member of a local club and you were how do I even say this politically correct? If you were involved in the breeders program and you were a BAP, and I'll just leave that next word open, Malawi fish are perfect for you because it's 15 points, 15 points, 15 points, 15 points. Every month you can hand in 4 or 5 fish. They all do exactly the same thing. That doesn't interest me at all. Maybe it's I've been keeping fish for so long, and I want something to challenge me. Like I got an award from KOAC. And I've had all these people tell me I'm lying. I just find that really funny. You're a liar. I read, I can't even remember the Latin name for it, but it's that Empire Gudgeon. The fire red gudgeon. It's just white fire red.
Where only the one dominant male turns red. Everything else is gray.
Yeah. Keep the milk, compressed, I think it is, and stuff like that. And I had them for a while. Spencer Jack, my local wholesaler, brought them in. They were there, and it was a fish I'd always kind of coveted. I always wanted to get that fish. I just never seen it before. And I've bred Turnadina ossilicata, some of the other gudgeons. Gudgeons is basically Australians' fancy word for goby. That's all it is. Yeah. Don't try and be all fancy with a new word, Adele or Jason and all you Australian people here. Nothing different. But I bred a bunch of those, Chlamydogobius remius, and some of those other ones, Magurna magurndas, and those fish. And they all kind of bred the same way. They're all platform spawners, tube spawners, or whatever, and they're all great. But everyone kept saying that this one can't be bred. Well, that's the challenge. That's the whole fun of doing what we do. So I ended up I knew that they're going to be absolutely minuscule fry, like almost all rainbow fish are the same thing. The fry are like glass slivers. So I ended up just throwing them outside. Now, I wasn't planning on breeding them. I don't set up fish to really plan breeding anymore. I just don't. And like if you're working with a kerosene or a barb, you have to kind of set them up. But otherwise, I just threw them outside in one of my vaults. And our horse trough, with pond plants and stuff. I just kind of forgot about them. They were the only fish that were out there. And in the fall, I had hundreds of them. And I grew some up, and they're very obviously what they were. But apparently that fish in the wild goes through a larval brackish stage.
Yeah.
Sorry. Wasn't provided. But my water is like out of the wells, like liquid rock and everything like that. And maybe the magic was in the water. I don't know. If people ask me questions, I don't know what the answer is. I bred it because I'm a liar. Now, another question from the field is that what are some of your biggest oh crap moments you've had with your fish, and the biggest mistakes or accidents? Sandy's covering up here. Sandy does not want to field this at all. Sandy's basically, she just removed herself from the chat.
All I can say is do not let Elwyn feed fish.
How many people, just even in our group here, how many people have had, gone away for a holiday and had the neighbor or a friend come over and feed fish? I used to do little baggies and portion it all out, keep them up on the tank with days of the week. And so what did Elwin do? This is a legendary fish keeper. This is Elwin Segrest. This is the guy that founded Segrest Farms. So we're going to talk about him now.
I don't know what came over him, and it's funny now. It wasn't funny then, but he thought that because it was so nutritious for dogs, that feeding gravy train would be good for fish.
Like gravy train dog food?
Gravy train dog food. And let me tell you what a greasy, nasty mess that leaves through an entire fish building.
We have a vet in our panel here right now. Gravy train dog food isn't suitable for dogs.
For dogs. And since then, he's never allowed to feed fish ever again. Ever.
Yeah, he's not alone. There was another fish farmer who fed Old Roy, that Old Roy dog food, which is the cheapest dog food there is, I think. And well, he was feeding angels. And this didn't happen to me. It was a colleague of mine who had the case. And he reported all the angels were floating at the surface of the pond, and they had swollen bellies. Well, they were full of gas from the Old Roy. They just had to, pass gas, and then they were able to be normal again.
Yep. I think assuming that you're going to turn the water off is one of my biggest things. And how many times have I walked away from the tank filling or draining, saying, I will remember this time.
I've left the water changer on a few times and almost killed 2 tanks full of some of the rarest fish ever. I went through a phase years ago in my fish room, and I had 3,800 gallons of water at the time, and I don't think I had a single fish that had a scientific name. It was like, I called it my brown phase. Every fish in the room was brown, nothing else. All right, we've kind of exceeded our hour already. Well, it doesn't really matter. We went further and above. We were an hour late anyways, all Biggs' fault, because he's in Saskatchewan. But where was that question I had for you guys here? Now, if there's one thing that you want, and I think the group here could probably ask me the same question. If you guys want to see these ladies back, either as a gang again or as individuals, let me know in the chat, let me know in the comments. And we will do our best to get all you guys back on board. I hope you guys have had some fun. But if there's one thing that any of you guys would like to do that you want the audience to take away from this rambled hour of conversation, what would you say it would be? Who wants to field it first? Shelby?
Yes. Get involved, especially right now when you have a lot of outreach you can do. If you've ever thought of keeping a fish tank or thought of doing something different and you're hesitant, now is a great time because everybody is so open to doing Zoom meetings or calling your retailer, calling your mentors. Do something different. But now is the greatest time to do that. And if you're looking to pursue a career in aquaculture or fish, look into that because there's a ton of options out there. I don't think people are aware of, as Dr. Petty mentioned, the University of Florida has some great programs. An aquaculture lab has great programs.
I have a line for my daughters, and you guys are going to back this up in a world that is dominated by men and we're the money makers. Is I tell my daughters to always keep their elbows up. That's the word, is elbows up. Because you're going to have to fight for whatever you want. If it's worthwhile doing it, you'll get it. And I don't care what you want to be. Just do whatever you got to do. And you guys, the 3 of you, have fought in a very male-dominant industry, and you're the absolute pillars that you are today. And I'm absolutely honored to have all 3 of you here today. Sandy, did you want to comment on that question?
I would just say it's a great time to be a naturalist. There's, we have...
Why, because we can't go outside the public?
What's that?
Why, because we can't go outside the public with people? Go be out by yourself in the woods.
Yes, actually, and you can connect with other people that share the same interest as you, and you can actually spend time appreciating the nature around you right now. So, yeah.
How about you, Dr. Petty?
I'd say quarantine all new purchases. That'd be my advice to everyone.
Well, you can extrapolate that even further, not just quarantine. If you get a new girlfriend, you quarantine her for a period of time. You bring home a new child, you quarantine them for a period of time. Every day. Quarantine. You bring home bananas, you put them in quarantine for a bit. That's good.
Watch out for salads.
Any last questions from everyone in the audience? I'm absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for coming and joining me. Thank you, Dr. Petty, Sandy, and Shelby. You guys absolutely made my night. I apologize to everyone for being late, but I think all of you would agree that it was definitely worth it. So, with that,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thanks, ladies.